Hello and welcome to part 5 of the Minecraft tutorials. Last time I spoke to you we looked at some functions, and specifically we were looking at a square and a triangle, and I left you with the puzzle of trying to build like what looked like a windmill or a flower kind of head using those functions. So we're going to start there. If you have not yet managed to solve that problem or have not fully understood the functions from the last session, I would advise you probably go over lesson 4 first before taking on this session. So let's jump over to the software, and this is the shape I tasked you with trying to make. So as you can see in the middle there, you've got your square, which should be in its own function, and then we've got 4 repetitions of the triangle going around. And it's really about, once you've written the functions for those 2 shapes, and if I just show you our guy over here and I get him to start making the flower as we're speaking, what's important is that you navigate him correctly to do the 4 triangles after he's finished that primary square. You'll notice he'll go straight into the first triangle, and when he finishes he'll kind of move into the position for the next triangle, and it's this that he ends up repeating. So you'll see that large move that he just did there. He went from the square there, which is to the right of that last one he placed, and he moves all the way across there by 10 squares, and then he reverses 1 square and then turns right in order to face the correct direction, so he's ready to start again, and then repeats the triangle process. So he does a triangle, he then moves 10 squares to his left and then reverses 1 and turns right. So he does this over and over. As usual, we're getting a bit of lag because recording and running Minecraft at the same time is not good for the processor. And there he goes, he's done his little thing. So I'm just going to show you some of the bits to this. So if you don't want to see this and you want to try it yourself, do stop now and just go back to it. But we've got our normal teleport command. Alright, we've got our setup, and our setup is here. So our setup for this is to give him 2 types of coloured blocks, one in slot 1, one in slot 2, and to put him in the air ready to do his thing. Then we've got the triangle, which is here, and we've got the square. Now we talked about these in lesson 4, so I'm not going to go through them in great depth, but basically this is a triangle that you start with the 5 in a row, and then it goes 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and that makes that triangle. And this is the square where it does 5, 5, 5, 5, 5, does 5 sets of 5. So they're the 2, and we've made them functions. Now the clever bit is just the flower command. So if we look at how simple it actually is, we call the square first initially, so it draws the square, and then as soon as he's finished, he moves to the right like he's programmed to, because he always moves to the right at the end of each bit of the square. And then I call triangle immediately, so that's why the first triangle just goes on the side. There's the moves I was talking about. Once he's finished, he needs to sidestep, he needs to sidestep 10 times. So he just sidesteps all the way across 10 times, and then he moves back by 1 square, turns right. He's now in the exact position he needs to be in to draw the second triangle. So if we repeat this process, as long as it's in this set order, draw the triangle first, move to the next location, then draw the next, move to the next location, draw the next, and so on and so on and so on. It does mean once he's finished that 4th triangle, he does end up moving, but this is the cleanest way of doing it. So I've got all that code in place, and that's why he draws us a lovely little triangle flower head like he does. So if you've not yet fully achieved that, I would invite you at this stage to pause the video and make sure you can do this and you've got these functions sorted before I move on to more complicated things. Okay, so pause now if that is you and you need to do that. Okay, so I'm going to move on, and this time what I'm moving on to is using a function. Now sometimes we have functions, or also known as procedures, in a program which run a set of commands when they are called, but just do the job they're meant to do, and they do the same job every time. I want to slightly change that, and the main kind of objective of this lesson is to use what's known as a parameter. Now, if you did this in a coding language, you'd be calling it, and usually in brackets, when you call the name of the function, you'd be putting values to pass to the function so that it can do something with them in order to then do its job. An example might be if you were playing a game, and let's say there was a function that's job is to give the player health when you pick up a health pack. So when you run over that health pack, maybe it was a small health pack and it needs to give you 10 health back. So it might call the function that's responsible for healing you and giving you health, the one that basically changes the variable of health, but it needs to know how much by. So you call that function with the value of 10, and then it uses that value you handed it to give 10 health points back to the player. And then you could reuse the same code, so you'd have to rewrite it then for any kind of size of health pack that the player were to pick up. So if they picked up a big health pack that's worth 50, you would then pass the value of 50 to that same function that did it for 10, but now this time it uses the 50 and gives the player a bit more health. Now this is the same premise as what we're going to use here. I want to build a square like you've learned to do, but I want to be able to tailor the function and reuse it for different sizes of square. So if you watch our little dude, and if I write S2, which I've pre-written, which stands for square 2, as in a 2 by 2 square, I will just run this, and hopefully 1, 2, there's a little 2 by 2 square. Now if I just come down here and bring him to me here, and then run instead S4, which I've pre-programmed, it calls the exact same function but is passing the number 4 to it. So we're getting, if the lag ever catches up, don't just look at me like you don't know what's going on. Go on. There we go. And he will draw a 4 by 4. Now I'm going to show you now in the code how we achieve this. So just bear me 1 second. Okay, so I am on the coding screen as normal. Let's just get a couple of things quickly set up which you would do in all cases. So let's get the teleportation in. Let's get our function down here that we would have to give our setup. So this is standard stuff which we've made before, and in setup we are going to give our agent some bricks. So give him some bricks. Let's give him any old thing. That'll do. Some wood. Let's give him 64 wood. Let's also activate that slot. Set slot 1 active. If you like, if you want to raise him in the air, you can do so here, but you can also do it inside each of the calls. That's completely up to you. So there we go. We've got our function there. Get rid of that. Don't want that. Right. So how do we start writing these things? You know that before you wrote a function for square. Let's do it as if we were doing it as if some text. All right. You would go, right, I want a square, and you'd have gone, let's do repeat 4 times, and then we're going to get our repeat loop for our square. We're going to need moving forwards. We're going to need placing bricks. So place down. Move, get off there. Don't make me get upset. There we go. In you go. Right, so that basically makes a row, 1 row. We want to do it 4 times. And then we want the agent at the end of each row to go back. Let's get that in here. Go back. We've done this a few times, so this shouldn't be confusing. 4. And then move to the right by 1. So this is the same pattern, but we've done it using variables. So we've been using the variables and setting a variable at the start of the program, usually saying set variable size to whatever number we want it to be. So this is an easy change if I wanted to add the variable of size. And then let's go set size to 4. And now all I do is put size in. So do size times, and then move back size. So if it's 4, he will repeat 4 sets of 4 of going block, 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 rewind by 4, move right, and then block, 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 rewind, and he does it 4 by 4. This is the kind of thing we were doing. We then put it into a function. So we then got our function, and we went, let's make a new function. We'll call it square. I don't know why I always do the A before the U on that. Right, so square. And then we pop that in there, and there you go. Now the change I'm going to show you is a real subtle change about how we add a parameter to our actual function. So to do this, let me just remove this a sec and get rid of that. I'm going to make the function, but this time I'm going to call it square, and then I'm going to click number here, and then it adds a value next to it, which is our like almost a variable within function, and we'll call it size. There we go. Now what you want to do is then use this size variable and drag it to overwrite these, okay? Because this is the size variable you want, not the variable we were using earlier. In fact, we don't want this really, so let's delete that. And then pop this into here. And then this size can then be used to overwrite these. Right, and then that one is dead. So this size variable is actually the one that's been dragged from here and is not located in variables, okay, because this is the parameter that we're referring to. Which means now when you look at the function, you can see that you've got call setup, because setup does this stuff and doesn't need anything, but you have call square and it has a value next to it because you can specify how big it's going to be. So if you go to call square, you now, whenever you do this, so let's say when I made my square S2, which you saw me running earlier, and I called it S2, I just put this in here and I said make that 2, which means it calls square and passes the value of 2. The value of 2 now is referred to as size when it gets passed into here. So it's expecting a number. That number now will be called size. So size is storing that 2 I handed it. And so it will go repeat 2 times, this 2 times, do this, reverse by 2, and do it twice. I could then duplicate this, create, another one and call it S3, and this one's for 3 times, and so on and so on. You can also see how you might call in a loop the square function, but do some stuff like have an actual variable at play and add to it or take away from it, so you could get varying increasing size or decreasing size of the shape over and over again. So now you've seen this, I want you to pause the video. You might want to have a look at some of the code. In fact, what I shall do is I'll just load up my previous code, which I know I've tested. I haven't tested that stuff, so I'll just load up this one as a reference. Here you go, which is, it is identical. So let me move some of this so you can see it. So this screen here, there, might be worth, that's the one you might want to pause it on in order to help support you. But I want you to make sure that you can do this and have a play with how you might call it with different sizes and see that effect. When you've done that, so now's the time to pause. So pause and have a go at that. And when you do come back to me, I've got then another challenge to take on. Okay, so pause now and have a go. Okay, if you're back, you get that. And so I'm going to give you a main challenge. What I want our guy to do is I want him to use this kind of function call like this. And what you're going to need to consider is the introduction of a variable, something like, let's call it number for now. And let's say we set that initial number to 9. And we're going to also want something like, from variables, we're going to want to change that number, or we're going to need to do something to number in order to alter it in some way. But let's say it starts on 9. There are ways using the, I think, logic block, or is it maths, the maths block, to take values away from a variable. But what I want you to think about is if you build a pyramid in Minecraft, it's essentially a square on a square on a square on a square. And the squares, the base size of the square starts on an odd number. And then, so let's do a little pyramid. If we were thinking of a little pyramid, you might have 5 by 5. And then on top of that, you'd have a 3 by 3. And then on top of that, a 1 by 1. So you see it goes from 5 to 3 to 1. And that's the pattern. It doesn't matter how big you start. If you started on 9, it would go 9, 7, 5, 3, 1. And so you can see each time that you draw the next square, the square's getting smaller by 2. So I'm telling you all these things to make you think about variables and how you then use this parameter. So if you have coded how to do a square, you should be able to create a piece of code which loops, but each time it calls, and think about your positioning also of your guy, each time it calls, it's building one layer of the pyramid, but then getting in position and building the next layer of the pyramid, which is a smaller square, and then in position and the next layer. And if you do it right, you should be able to repeat that kind of system, but with a varying, a decreasing scale of calling with a smaller variable, so that you're drawing ever decreasing size of square to build up the pyramid. All right, so have a go at that. I'm not going to, like all these videos, I'm not giving you the solution here. This is the main task. You're going to have a little go on that, and then in the next the next video, I shall start with the solution. So hopefully that makes sense. Do have a go, see how you get on. So pause the video and have a go at making me a nice impressive pyramid. And if you get a bit lost, you can just rewind, look at some bits, revisit, and just use what you can in order to get as far as you can with it. All right, so good luck, enjoy. I hope that makes sense. Until I see you next time, take care.